Okay, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Diana Ospina, and I will be your host for today. Today's topic is SAP Data Archiving and Information Lifecycle Management, presented by Mark Minich. Mark is the founder of Round 2 Consulting Services and possesses 20 years of SAP Archive Link experience, a leading expert in SAP Data Archiving, Information Lifecycle Management, and Document Management. Mark provides unbiased information to assist with implementing archive solutions. Mark has helped many companies leverage their SAP environment to achieve greater rates of return in the manufacturing, pharmaceutical, utility, oil, retail, and public sectors. Now, without any further ado, I will now pass this over to Mark to begin the webinar.
Okay, thank you, Diana. Okay, you can see my screen okay?
Yes, you may just have to zoom in a bit.
There we go. Okay, thank you everyone for joining the SAP Data Archiving and Information Lifecycle Management webinar we've got scheduled today. As Diana stated, I have 20 years experience in SAP archiving in both data archiving and document archiving. I've worked alongside many certified CRMs or certified records management officers and been exposed to a lot around data retention and disposition. Have expertise in integrating third-party products with SAP, primarily in the Archive Link and now ILM area, and started my own company in 2001, and this is our sole focus. And it is in this particular area, enterprise content management and SAP data archiving. So it's one thing that we do, and we do it well, and we have a lot of seasoned consultants that provide a variety of expertise in the ECM data archiving space. Okay, I have lots to share with you, so we're probably going to be a bit tight on time today. We're going to look at the information lifecycle, SAP ILM and data archiving, the database trends and impacts that bring the project to the forefront, and what's the best practice approach or the methodology typically used to implement an archiving strategy for your organization. And we'll take a quick look at accessing archive data as well, as far as what options are available out in the market for you and what could potentially be best for your organization. And then we'll look at the two main components to the information lifecycle management tool, or ILM, which is the retention management, retention warehouse, and wrap up with our Q&A. Okay, so first off, let's look at the information lifecycle. I have a bar here that represents a length of time. So we're assuming 2010 to the end of 2021. We have the value of data, which more or less we see from a 2010 standpoint. If we're in that particular year, we have a high value of that information, and the business has a high need for that information with year-over-year comparisons. And as time progresses, it obviously decreases as far as the need for the business to utilize it for reporting purposes, and also the typical business query doesn't go beyond a set number of years typically. The area in green is highlighted to represent the document residence period, so how long data is going to reside in the SAP database as we know and love it. And then we have a milestone here to highlight an event where we actually archive the data, where data remains accessible in the archive files, but is no longer in the SAP database. Okay. Along the way, we can have spikes in value of data should there be a legal case that comes about or audit inquiries. And of course, that's going to spike the value of data, and there needs to be a means to access that information and provide it, especially to legal authorities as well. Another area that I like to highlight is the corporate tax filing date. So the corporate tax group is typically for corporations is given a lot of leeway or time to submit tax to the authorities, and it's usually from this point in time that I like to base the last filing date that they're given, that I like to base retention from. Okay, so if we look from a business view, we have a nice linear, anything in 2010 obviously is applicable to the end of 2021. But with this offset, 9-month offset that corporations have to submit their taxes, we then have an extension or a 9-month offset where we can finally dispose of the data on October 1st, 2021. So that's sort of the legal retention requirement for our retaining data purposes. And altogether, this represents the information lifecycle. So SAP has produced the Information Lifecycle Management tool to assist with managing the data securely, efficiently, and control that data throughout its life cycle, from creation to use, when it's archived, and then finally its destruction from the environment. So, and it's based on 3 pillars: data archiving more or less being a cornerstone for it, and then the 2 other elements or components of ILM, which is the retention management tool and retention warehouse. Okay, so the first pillar is data archiving. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that have taken on data archiving or have even archived it in their organization, or have certainly heard it at the very least from time to time, and should it be something that the organization should take on. SAP provides a set number of archive objects. Way back in 3.1H, it was 110 archive objects. Now there's well over 600. And what that archive object does is it basically represents an SAP document, and it has a set of conditions and rules that must be met to show that a document or transaction is complete in SAP. And then when it is, it will write out that record or document to the file system in an SAP proprietary format. And then subsequently, that file can be stored in an archive server. Okay. Strictly for data archiving, solely for data archiving, an archive server isn't absolutely required, but in most cases, organizations running SAP do tend to have some sort of archive server for imaging or document management, and we can certainly utilize that tool or that server for storage of archive files. Okay, so trends of database growth. Large global corporations especially tend to have a very complex system landscape. There can be upstream systems, downstream systems, sales order systems feeding the environment, transportation management systems that are external to SAP. And there's a lot of interchanges between these systems. There's also diverse regulatory retention requirements. So depending on what type of industry you're in, and also what country you have operations in, it can get pretty complex as far as being able to satisfy those requirements. And of course, all of these systems create a high volume of transactions within your SAP environment. And a large portion of IT budget is really sustaining this infrastructure. And it's only a matter of time before that sustainment or a portion of that sustainment budget needs to be allocated towards data archiving or information lifecycle management. So it's overall just a healthy thing to do for the system, and good practice for the corporation, as well as limiting liability. Okay, and of course the impacts with database growth are reduced system performance. You have slower response times, an increased administrative effort, so doing refreshes, backups, running batch jobs, and those windows can decrease. And when you have that inefficient use of system resources, of course, your cost of ownership is going to increase. So, and it's usually when things are slowed down to the user community, or there are very tight windows to get jobs completed. This typically brings the archiving project to the forefront. Okay. And of course, the risks of database growth are, one, maintaining the retention of large data volumes for specifically in a global environment where you have many different countries, many divisions across many different countries, and ensuring that the information is being kept for the proper amount of time. and what happens during litigation or audits, and should you be hosting or keeping data longer than you legally are required to, should there be an issue or item found, auditors are well within their right, or legal tax authorities are well within their right to go beyond the legal retention requirement. You have the data, you're liable to it. So if they do find something, they can go back as far as you have and hold the corporation accountable to it. So there is some value in keeping things lean and tidy from a data retention standpoint. And another added value with an archiving as well is your disaster recovery. So if you have 15 years worth of data in your database, what is your disaster recovery time in a worst case scenario? What amount of time is it going to be to get that database rebuilt? Okay, so with an archiving strategy in place, you can significantly reduce the amount of downtime should a disaster recovery be required. Okay, so this is a proven methodology that we use, these 7 steps to implement a data archiving strategy. Steps 1 and 2 overlap a little bit. They sort of give us insight to how the system is used and which people we need to draw upon from your organization to have a discussion with and see what avenues are available to us. We'll cover each of these steps here a little bit in more detail. The technical analysis is really looking at the database. It's fairly granular look at your system, and what we're doing is mapping the tables and records in the tables and identifying the appropriate archive objects that are going to address the size and growth of your system. Okay, it's the foundation for scope and design. You map these tables to the incorrect archive objects, or it's done incorrectly, then you're not going to get the results you needed, and you're pretty much heading down the wrong direction before you even get started with your project. So this is a key area to be particular about. So assembling the project team, we look at all the relevant parties. I mean, it is an enterprise resource planning system. It typically touches on each department or area of the enterprise, and we in hand need to also bring the users to the table to hear about what their knowledge is of the business, what their needs are for that particular information. We usually bring everyone together for a kickoff presentation to give them an overview of what that presentation or what an archiving project is about. And then in subsequent days, we'll meet with the groups in individual sessions and have a good Q&A as far as what their concerns are and what capabilities are available for the archive objects, as of course they do differ from object to object. And the main point here is really that data archiving shouldn't be done in an insulated fashion. So there's stories where organizations have tried to do so, and then they're very reactive to troubles that arise, and you're in a reactive state where, involving the user community, of course, has you being in a proactive manner, and then there's a lot more avenues available to us with data in the database as opposed to these archive files. So it's really nice to build a strategy and remain fluid and responsive to business needs as opposed to just moving forward without their input. Okay, so after we've done our kickoff presentation, we have our team formed, and we've done our analysis with the functional group. We then look at the dependencies between archive objects. We look at cross-module dependencies and what dependencies might be fleshed out across different departments. And of course, we also need to take into consideration the audit requirements, and quite often DART becomes a prerequisite to archiving before an archiving project. So really someone needs to be a liaison between all these different groups and ensure things are run smoothly. And we also take an opportunity while doing the design for the archiving strategy to do a deeper analysis on the tables and see what other methods we have available to getting data off the system as well. Okay. So testing. I know there's a lot more people involved in this space, in the archiving space, than there has been in the past. And I think a great way to find out if you're getting value from the organization or person that you're bringing on to help out with your archiving project is to ask questions around testing. How are you going to engage the user community with testing and get user acceptance? What are you going to do to ensure these archive objects are functioning as they are expected to and are identifying and archiving the appropriate data? And there's a lot in this space and an engagement, which it shouldn't be overtaxing for the user community, but it certainly gives them an opportunity to call things out, find out if the workarounds are acceptable with the gaps that come about by archiving data or removing it from the database, and to see what can be done or what further development might be needed to satisfy those potential gaps. So also have stories of organizations giving me a call that have marched on and not done user acceptance testing, and of course there's been some issues and there's high priority instances opened up, and then all of a sudden somebody's got to explain something to upper management as to why these events occurred. So not necessarily the greatest position to be in, but it has happened out there. So implementation and testing. OSS notes are just the de facto part of life with archiving. You can be on the latest enhancement pack, latest support pack. There's no shortage of OSS notes out there in the world in any area, and there certainly isn't with data archiving. So there needs to be a good review and make sure the archive objects are up to snuff. And then really the rest is pretty much a standard with any project. Your configuration and customizing needs to be complete. Transports ensure they are complete and being imported into other environments correctly. Of course, testing the storage solution. Is it getting stored where you wanted it to? Is it being retained for as much as you need it to? And what is really your retention strategy with an archive server, assuming ILM is not used at this particular point in time. Of course, there's no shortage of variants for an archive project. There can be post-processing activities as well. And of course, testing from a technical aspect, as well as getting the functional user acceptance test as well completed to really evaluate your access before you go live. So once we've finally archived the data and we have our archive file sitting in an archive system and we have our ECC environment, what methods or which ways can we actually access that information, and what changes to the user community is something that we need to flesh out with user acceptance testing. So the standard access methods provided by SAP is the archive information system. That is the core of retrieval for data from the archive. It's transaction SARE or SARE. From there, there's always a technical view to display that information, which isn't very meaningful to the users. And there's always going to be a read program available. So the technical view more or less gives you data field and the value within that data field. So it's very much looking at a record set level, and it's a display of data as opposed to information. And the read programs are more or less going to read a file and then just give you a list of what exists, document number, vendor number, and so on. So it's not very meaningful as either, but from a technical aspect, it gives you a means to identify what's in a file. There is single document display for a good set of documents. And again, it's more from a financial audit perspective that this single document display is available for. So it's sales orders, billing documents, financial accounting documents, deliveries, and POs. So that's pretty much where your single document display access is. There are still gaps with that single document display that could impede the business to get at some particular information. And that's why we want to go through part of that exercise with the user community. Another great tool that SAP provides is the Document Relationship Browser, or the DRB. Is available in transaction AL01. It gives you a means to access information, whether it's online or archived, or you can couple both together. And if you search by, there's a set number of documents that you can search by, and it will give you all the related documents to say a purchase order or to a sales order or delivery, whichever document you've done your search by. You will see the flow of documents that are associated with it. So it's quite a handy tool, and I find that when users get used to using it, this is more or less the transaction they would go to execute their searches and business inquiries. So it's just a lot more intuitive tool to use. Okay. There's also third-party solutions for accessing archived information, and one of the main players is the PBS software. It's a German-based company. They've been around for a very, very long time. I think they just celebrated their 25th anniversary last year, and they are specific to building transactions to display archive data exactly as it was when it was online. So that is their bread and butter. They do provide a storage, a content link server for storing archive files. It can do imaging as well. It's not necessarily its forte or as savvy as some of the other solutions, but it is capable of hosting images as well. TJC is a French-based company that also focuses on the archiving space. They have some great tools to remove contingencies, like around Dart, and also a tool to assist with the administrative effort of execution of archive jobs. So they've got some great products there that can be leveraged to expedite an SAP or an archiving project. Excuse me. Okay, if you have a heavily customized SAP environment, then you're likely going to have to also move forward with a customized archiving solution. So that would go hand in hand. But with enhancements and the like that are available now, it's really not that common to come across, but there has been situations where companies are forced in the past, 6-month residence time, they were forced to archive billing documents in the SD area because there was a significant performance issue. And then you can still get a credit memo that needs to be applied to that billing document. So that was a customized solution that we had to provide that is by no means an easy or simple way to do things, but it was an avenue that we had to go down given the circumstances. But again, very rare. And there's also, some easier things in customizing display of archive data and giving them a customized solution for other SD data as well. So other players in the storage and imaging place is KGS is a smaller German-based company. There's of course OpenText, Mercedes-Benz that has a large product suite involved with SAP around enterprise content management and its integration with SAP. And Kofax is a great OCR engine for the capture side. And we are affiliated and work with these softwares and are happy to help out or give some feedback with these and others should you be considering any of them. All right, so just a moment rather than doing a development effort as well, you can also lean on PBS Archive add-ons. These are the list of add-ons, and they more or less coincide with a module or submodule and a respective archive object, and the list reports and the transaction codes for displaying the document are pretty much exactly as the user is familiar with, so it's very easy for user acceptance. The additional information that's provided with the PBS add-ons is there's usually a field that if it's populated with an asterisk indicates it comes from the archive. If it's blank, it indicates it came from the database. And likewise with the list reports, it will provide you with a column with the asterisk or blank showing that it's where that data is sourced from. Is it been archived or is it online in a database? And otherwise, it's pretty much identical in every way, shape, or form to the way it was displayed and what capabilities are there when it's online. Okay. When can we use it? The PBS add-ons are great for having to use a more aggressive residence period. So if you can use a shorter residence period, the PBS add-ons can alleviate a lot of business needs by using that tool with its capabilities. It's also great for large global enterprises to streamline user acceptance. You have a lot of divisions over the globe. This could take quite a bit of time using the standard SAP, and the PBS add-ons really do provide added value in those situations, especially if you have a global instance and growth rates are quite high. TGAC has an audit extraction cockpit. It's a great tool to alleviate the prerequisite using Dart to create extracts and views. Dart is US specific. Canada also can utilize that tool. It now has a SAFT requirement or SAFT format that the better part of Europe is going forward with in producing files to tax authorities. And the TGAC actually can read from archive files and create Dart views or views in those particular formats for the respective countries. So it can do it even after the fact, where the standard Dart tool is not able to do so. And there's also ILM does have some Dart view capability in it, but that's something we'll touch on a little bit later in a later slide. Okay, so to the second pillar of ILM, which is the retention management. The retention management came out or has been available since 7.1. There's two main parts to it, which is the retention manager, information retention manager, and legal case management. So the IRM does have a data destruction feature to it. So once the retention management or retention has been met, there is a tool available for actually disposing of or deleting that particular data. Okay, and what ILM does is when it's brought into the system or imported into the system or activated, it enables these archive objects. So it really is an extension of the archive programs. And I guess a set of ILM objects or ILM enabled objects can become available in ERP 6 and Enhancement Pack 6. And there right away is noticeable 3 ILM actions. So there's archive as we know and love it. There's a snapshot feature, which will write out archivable and non-archivable data. So it will disregard the rules and write out all data to a file. And that's typically used for a decommissioning scenario. And then there's also a data destruction feature. Okay, and this will produce an archive file still and make sure data is written out correctly to an archive file, and then do the subsequent deletions, provided the other ILM retention rules are met. Okay, so there is a safeguard in there. It's not going to just go ahead and wipe everything out of the database and it's all said and done. So there are safeguards in there. It also won't initiate store job of your archive file because it knows you do not intend or need to keep that information, nor will it populate the archive info structure with data so you can retrieve it as that makes sense, since you're out to just remove it from the database and get rid of it. Okay. ILM cannot be deployed without retention management. So in a sense, is everything, all the archive objects and everything is built around these ILM rules. And the ILM retention manager, you're essentially defining rules to control residence periods of data and the retention periods of that information. Okay, and along with it, you're also saying where you're going to store that information. So what content repository is it going to go to? And then finally, what end storage are you going to go to? So you have a worm, some write once, read many digital device that needs to be ILM aware, and it's going to send a unique resource identifier. And the way it differentiates from your typical archive link communication is now you are actually passing the value of how long, or telling the archive server how long do you need to keep this data. And when it gets written to that medium, it says, okay, I need to keep this for 3 years. Another file comes in and it's qualified and it says, okay, I need to keep this one for 5 years, and so on. So it happens ad hoc during runtime. Okay, and finally, once those times are elapsed, then there's the avenue or possibility to actually destroy the data once the archive file has met the retention time. Okay, there's two policy categories. You have the residence period and retention period. And it's calculated dynamically. So you can select the date field that you want it to go by. So creation date, change date, posting date. And you can set your retention rules on a date field within a table associated with the archive object. And you can actually create offsets. So you can go to end of month, end of the quarter, or even end of the year to create your retention requirements, or you can even create a customized one. So where I had mentioned the tax filing, last tax filing date being 9 months after fiscal year end, we can actually define a rule that will push the retention period to that time. Excuse me. So that's another capability or feature within ILM tool. There's also audit areas, which are client-specific configuration. And these audit areas, the standard 3 that are available, come under your tax area, your product liability, and then there's a general area. And whatever rules and policies you make in here, which can also be country specific, they all have to be met. So all your rules that you define in each of those audit areas and that are active in the system, they all have to be met for residence time to meet, to get archived, and also your retention. So it will default to the highest value or priority of rules that you set, and then stamp it with the appropriate retention time as it gets archived and stored onto the ILM device, okay, or your ILM or archive server. The other component of ILM is or retention manager is legal case management. This is a great tool. It obviously can create a legal case, and you can put a hold on particular data, and that will prevent the destruction of an archive file. There's a great tool, the discovery tool. It works a lot like the DRB, so it will find associated documents based on a search. It will look online and archive, and will impose legal holds regardless of where the data resides. So this doesn't necessarily prevent data from getting archived, but when a particular record or document does get archived that's been identified or a part of a legal case, it will inherit that legal hold, and there'll be no way to destroy it once it does get written out and stored to the archive server. So right away, it's going to be locked. It'll have appropriate timestamp underlying it, but it's going to get locked, and there's be no way to actually destroy that data and compromise the litigation or ongoing legal process. Okay, so a great tool. Also, OpenText has a extended ECM for SAP that works with ILM-Retention Manager, and they have a records management component, a records manager component on the extended ECM side that will marry and harmonize with ILM as well. So now you have unstructured data tied to your structured system of record, and makes e-discovery a snap, an easy cinch to discover data that's pertinent to a legal matter. So it's a great tool to have, and a good time saver. So the third pillar is the retention warehouse, and this is primarily used for the system shutdown. So a lot of companies, especially larger companies, they're realizing that, in the mid-90s, I mean, you could say the word SAP and you pretty much got a job in this space. But now, a good generation has passed, and there's a lot more knowledge in the space, and a lot of people going to S/4HANA, or I hear a lot of chatter that they wish to start a whole new install and start fresh and have a proper system of record without a lot of the litter that gets created with trying to get a system up and running. And with that, there's going to be legacy systems to address. So now you have, the predecessor system, which is referred to as legacy system in that sense. It has all the historical information. There could be business inquiries that are still needed, and there's still a legal tax audit obligation to meet and to keep that data. So you can continue to support that legacy system, and there could be additional costs for support costs should the maintenance window for that release elapse. So there could be a higher cost to that. There's also shutting down a legacy system with a non-SAP solution, but that's sort of, then you don't have anything SAP-centric, so there could be some cause for concern also from the user community using a non-SAP solution to decommission quite a complex environment. And then there's, of course, the SAP ILM tool, which SAP provides as the only way to shut down a legacy system or a predecessor system. Okay, and how does that do that? Again, it has enhanced a set of archiving objects, ILM enhanced archive objects, to produce the snapshot of data. And that's where you're not necessarily, you're creating an archive file that with technically complete data, and also doesn't have to be closed. Not all items have to be finished, or the business does not have to be completed. It's simply going to grab all the information in your variant, write it out to an archive file, and then you can actually transfer that over to the current system. Okay. There is an option you can choose field values and create some checksums to do some checks and balances on the data that's being extracted. You can then compare it to the legacy system, bring it over and convert to the current system, and again check those, do those checksums to make sure nothing has been corrupted with the transfer. And at least from a technical standpoint, you're ensuring there's some quality control with the transfer of data from a legacy system. Another component to this too is a lot of companies, of course, are using document imaging, and there's a set of link tables that reference the attachment stored on an archive server to the SAP document that resides in your legacy system. And there is actually a way that you can extract those link tables, bring that information over to the current archive server or ILM device, and get them stored and apply your retention rules with it as well. So when you bring over the archive files, if you've done data archiving, those attachments are still accessible when it's archived from the current system, and we're sort of ensuring that association still exists with legacy archive files that are coming across to the current environment as well. One thing to note, if you are using say SAP DMS, document management system, that would be a separate project on its own. So you have attribute data that will reside in DMS and pointing to the storage of those documents and versioning and whatnot. That would be a separate project in itself. And OpenText also has a DocuLink tool where attribute data or attribute search that you use is in a Z table, a customer specific table, and they're pointing to an image stored on the archive server. That's going to be a separate project as well. So if you have those in those cases, there'll be additional work to the links that are stored to standard SAP transactions. Okay, so system shutdown involves, so again, you need the retention manager. So when you're going to receive or transfer files from a legacy system to a current system, you need to create your snapshot files, which ignores the archive rules. And you need to bring it over to the retention manager. And then with that, you have stored server or files on that particular server. You have to get all the pertinent data. Doesn't mean you necessarily that you get all the data, but pertinent data that the business may need or need to draw upon at various times. And also from a legal tax audit, need to be wary of what they're going to need to satisfy a legal tax audit before you shut down a legacy system. Okay, and there's evaluations of data extracts. So the retention warehouse does produce a way to evaluate that data and utilize BW if you haven't utilized BW prior to the system shutdown already. Okay, so the evaluation of data. So certainly there's a means to create view files from ILM against the archived information. That is something that really should be compared to the standard DART tool. I think that's the best way to ensure things are up to snuff, especially from a legal tax audit standpoint. It is possible to take DART extract files from an older or another one environment and transfer it over to an existing one or to your current system. That is an increase in scope of work as well, but there is that possibility to do that. So one of the things when you're also evaluating data is that I have this extract or archive file from a legacy system. I cannot then bring it over to a current system and display a document as I would from data in the current database. So I can't do FB03 select an archive file from your legacy system and display it in the current live system. That is not possible to do. So the retention warehouse provides transaction IWP01, where you define record set or what you want to display from an archive file. It's somewhat technical in nature. It is in tabular format, and it provides a means then to pass that information on to BW. Should there be a need to expand the info cubes or staging areas in the BW environment, or you can simply also do manipulations and some reporting or search capabilities with MS Excel itself as well. Okay. So again, we should be some technical checks and balances against the migration of these archive files from a legacy system to your current system, and then as well the opportunity for the business community to say give their stamp of approval as well. Okay. So ILM, I guess it does ensure compliance, residence, and retention policies, and it manages it all from within SAP. So data is created in SAP. It sort of makes sense that all the drivers for retention and residence periods are managed from within SAP, as opposed to the archive link way, which not to say is impossible, but there is some more administrative overhead with ensuring the retention requirements are set. And there's also no legal hold possible with standard SAP without ILM as well. So, of course, the legal case management or LCM tool prevents the destruction of data with that feature. And then there's, of course, system landscape optimization option with the decommissioning or the means to decommission a system. So, and it does come at a cost. It's not free. Like the DART tool is free. That everyone has it with their purchase of an SAP license, but the ILM tool, there is a cost to it, and it really depends on your industry and your situation. And it's really a case-by-case basis if it's going to provide added value to your organization. So if you're in pharmaceutical, very regulated, a lot of compliance matters to attend with, different from if you're producing chainsaws and lawnmowers. There's going to be different things to look at compared to if you're manufacturing clothing and or toys. So that there's going to be different scenarios, and of course also size of company is going to come into play, whether ILM makes sense to have it from a compliance standpoint, or you're going to get a good return on investment with utilizing it to decommission environments for your system landscape and free up server space and power usage in your data center. So there can be lots of benefits with the system landscape optimization and decommissioning SAP environments. So regardless of that, you can still archive data from your environment and reduce database size and curtail growth. And of course, that will eventually become part of your sustainment. And that reduces your downtime for refreshes and backups, and improves performance, and maintains a healthy windows for batch processing. And of course, also archiving and having some dissolution process in place to get rid of data is going to mitigate your risk from a legal standpoint and also from audit as well. Okay, and then of course the added insurance with reduced disaster recovery time. You can easily reduce your database 2/3 or more with a good archiving strategy in place. Okay, and overall that's going to reduce your total cost of ownership and improve return on investment for your system. And that pretty much is a wrap for the presentation. I've put together some key areas you can look to get more information. So there's the data management guide. You need SAP Service Marketplace access to get at that directory. There's lots of information around ILM and DART in that URL there. You can look at the SAP Certified Solutions directory. That's standard on their website. And then there's also a couple of OSS notes for your reference with the launch of and release of ILM, the latest release of ILM for you there as well. So if there's any additional questions, you can feel free to put them forward now or contact me directly at your convenience. Feel free. I'd certainly love to help out wherever I can, or micromanagement as well.
Great, thank you, Mark. It's a great presentation, and we have quite a few questions here. Unfortunately, we are out of time, so we won't be able to cover all the questions. I'm going to pick and choose just a couple, and then the rest will be forwarded to Mark, and Mark, you can follow up accordingly. So,
okay, great.
Here we have is from Carl Schultz. Where do the rules for data retention come from?
Where do the rules for data retention come from? These have to be defined within the audit areas of the retention manager. So you need to define the rules for the archive objects and base your retention based on those rules.
Okay, we have another question here from Sue Riddle. If you are experiencing performance issues, is there a way to tell if it is the SAP database, need to do some archiving, or another issue?
Interesting. I mean, I'd have to inquire as to where is the issue happening and what frequency is it happening at? Is it during peak times or whatnot? So I would need a little more information to say so. I mean, if archiving doing deletions, that's quite taxing on the database, so that's going to slow things down quite a bit if you're doing that during a peak time. If there's general performance issues and just having a report complete and display the results, then I would say it's probably a data volume issue, and I just need more information to accurately give what the cause might be in that area. So basis folks, we should also have a great set of tools to be able to hone in on that as well.
Okay, we have another question here from JC. Is SARE and AL01 transaction codes?
Yes, they are.
Okay. And then one last question here from Samantha Waterman. Under storage and imaging, what is your opinion of just using the SAP Content Management Server with MaxDB?
Okay, SAP Content Management Server, I finished a data retention and disposition report for the Government of Canada, and for some reason, SAP Content Server is widely used there, and SAP themselves do not state that the Content Server is a compliant device. So as far as all the rules and regulations around storing electronic storage of data, SAP is not fully compliant. So it's not going to meet the statutes defined in law as a host or proper storage of electronic data. So that's neither here nor there. As far as I know, that's what's stated right in their website as well. I could forward the link to an SAP site that simply says it is not a compliant storage solution. So that's one thing to worry about, and how heavy that issue might be depends on the type of business that we're talking about, or what is it as well, right? So again, pharmaceutical has a lot more rigid regulation compared to somebody that's going to be manufacturing clothes. So it all depends what the organization's comfortable with in that matter, but it is not considered a compliant device.
Okay, great. So we do have, a couple of outstanding questions, and these will be forwarded to Mark to follow up with you directly. You will also receive a copy of this webinar with his contact information. We did go over a little bit over the time limit, but I do appreciate everyone attending today. Mark, thank you so much for your time. It was a great presentation, and we hope to welcome you back all to our next presentation.
All right, thank you.
Everyone.
My pleasure.
Thank you.